guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from the United States, English language, released in the year 2007, directed by Jonathan Hensley, and this film was called Welcome to the Jungle. So Welcome to the Jungle uses the story of the disappearance of Michael Rockefeller in 1961. Now Michael Rockefeller in the United States was a very powerful figure, his family were very powerful, but in 1961 he travelled to Papua New Guinea and he was never seen again. And so a lot of people believe that he was eaten by cannibals, and other people have different stories. You know, some people believe that maybe he just disappeared because he didn't want to lead the life that he was leading. And so this group of friends at the start of the film, they're in Fiji, but then they start to read about Michael Rockefeller and they want to uncover the truth. And they believe that they can get to the truth by making a documentary. They'll become millionaires. And so they get to Papua New Guinea, they become accustomed with the new country, and then they venture into uncharted territory, but then they realise what's in the Papua New Guinea wilderness might actually prevent them from ever returning. So whether or not that is the case is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Welcome to the Jungle. Expectation levels were at a very curious high with this movie. I didn't know what to expect, and the reason why I wanted to watch the film is that no one ever talks about it. Now with my channel, I love to review foreign horror films or foreign movies in general, but if they're not foreign, they're usually movies that no one really talks about, and so that's what provides something a little bit different in my channel. Every now and then I might review a mainstream film, but these are movies that I like to get out in the open and hopefully open your eyes to movies that, as I said, no one else really talks about. And so that's basically what I bring to the table, and that's why I wanted to see Welcome to the Jungle. Is that it was a found footage style horror film, but it was a horror film that takes place within a true story. It's the disappearance of Michael Rockefeller, what happened to this guy. And I really like horror films that use that aspect, and it's kind of like a legend of its own. It's a perspective of what's happened to this person in a very fun way. And so I thought, all right, well, this is a recipe for absolute success. Is that this director, Jonathan Hensley, is actually a well-established director, and mixing that with a very interesting story and setting itself in Papua New Guinea. Now this is one of the last places on earth that has uncharted territory. No one knows what goes on inside this, and so I thought that provides a lot of suspense. It provides a lot of disorientation, and that disorientation basically wipes away the safety net. If you don't have a safety net while you're watching, this can create one of the best horror experiences that you could ever imagine. And so I thought, all right, well, the recipe is there for an absolute success, the recipe for a movie that you will not forget in a hurry. And so I thought, all right, well, I definitely have to watch the movie. And so not really expecting too much, I come away from this movie still very disappointed by what I got, because I believe that this should have been a good horror film, but in the end what it is an extremely mediocre and disposable horror film. Now I'll go through the negatives. Unfortunately there are so many more negatives than positives, but the positive to this film is it is actually very well shot, and that it's actually going to prevent a lot of irritation as far as found footage horror films are concerned. Now a lot of people, the biggest criticism to found footage horror films is the shaky cam, and Jonathan Hensley uses shaky cam in very sparingly in this film, so you can actually focus on what's going on. And because you can focus on what's going on, there are one or two scenes in this film that are masterfully done as far as creeping out the viewer. It's just done in a way where it's a panning shot, and you can see with amongst the trees and the bushes, you can see something that I just thought really does make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And so I thought that is down to the fact that you can actually focus on what's going on. So I like that aspect of this found footage style, is that it's a very well polished style, and if you don't like found footage, you can kind of forget that it is a found footage horror film. And so that was actually fairly decent. And there's also a little homage to Cannibal Holocaust. So if you like Cannibal Holocaust, you're going to like the little nods to that film that this movie provides. And there are some very gory moments and some pretty nasty moments that I thought were actually there for an added bonus, and actually creates that sense of extremity as far as horror films are concerned. But unfortunately, that is basically where the positives end, and this is where the negatives start. Now, the overall story of Michael Rockefeller's disappearance, mixed in with the beauty and the vast sort of landscape of Papua New Guinea that can become beautiful but at the same time terrifying, it should have been a great film, but unfortunately the lack of self-awareness prevents this movie from being memorable, is because it focuses on all the wrong areas. Now, it should have been focusing on what's inside this wilderness. It should have been focusing on the story, but it focuses on the characters in this film. Now, the characters are some of the most unlikable characters that you will ever see in a movie, and it has a lot of stereotypical sort of transformations of these characters. The interactions between these characters you've seen time and time again, and because you don't want to associate with these very annoying people, you disconnect yourself from what's going on, and so you start to lose interest. You start to lose interest into what happened to Michael Rockefeller. You start to lose interest in what is happening inside the wilderness, because you want to see these people die the most horrible deaths as soon as possible. And if you don't have characters that you can really root for, you don't really have that sense of fear. You don't have that sense that you want to see them get through this ordeal. You want to see them die horribly. So you're taking the side of the dark element of the movie. And if you have that side of the dark element, you're not fearing that dark element. And if you're not fearing the dark element, you're basically defeating the purpose of a horror film. And so the 3/4 of this movie, you're spending time with these characters, and it's basically a character drama of very unlikable people. And I started to think, okay, is this actually a horror film? Is that it has horror lingering over it. It has this perfect landscape and a perfect recipe for a horror film, but it just doesn't realise that. And so it's focusing on characters that you absolutely hate. That is basically every annoying stereotype that you've seen in other films with annoying people is basically existing within these characters. And because the majority of the film just takes place with them bickering, I just thought it was an absolute chore. And when it comes time for the draw card to take centre stage, basically the horror aspect and it's the anticipation of what's inside this wilderness, it's over before you know it. And so it's only 10 or so minutes that has horror. And so the anticipation is basically over before you know it. It's like that firework that you know you're anticipating is going to illuminate the sky, but it just fizzes out. And it's over before you know it, and you're left thinking, is that it? And so the horror aspect, it doesn't go, basically it doesn't crawl under your skin. There are some scenes that will actually make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, but it's because it was masterfully shot, but the anticipation is non-existent. Nothing is ever sustained in a way where I thought as though the horror aspect really worked. And so it wanted to be a horror film, but it just doesn't know how to be a horror film. And so it focuses on all the wrong areas, and therefore it just becomes an incredibly mediocre film. I wasn't expecting anything from this movie, but I still come away from it bitterly disappointed, because a director with more self-awareness and more competency as far as creating horror is concerned, it could have made a film that was thought was absolutely brilliant. But it just felt like a director who is actually a well-established director was out of his depth as far as his genre is concerned. He didn't know exactly how to create a horror film, and in the end what it is just a complete mess and a complete waste of time. So no one talks about this movie for a very good reason. And so overall, for Welcome to the Jungle, I'm going to give this one star, don't even bother. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.